Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Pulse of Israel. I am here with David Bedin. Shalom, David.
Shalom uvracha.
David is the director of the Nachum Bedin Center for Near East Policy Research. Now, you are about to give us a totally different perspective on the deal Israel recently made with the United Arab Emirates. And from what I understand, this perspective you're about to share with us is not really being talked about anywhere, where anyone who knows David Bedin knows that makes sense. And if I may use a quote that you actually told me from Rabbi Riskin, Rabbi Riskin once said about David Bedin, be careful about asking David Bedin what's new, because he might actually tell you. So that gives you a little insight into the types of information that David and his research policy center come up with and promote out in the world to be heard and hopefully make a difference. So David, please tell us what perspective of this UAE deal is not being discussed, that you're basically waving a red flag.
That's correct. Whereas the idea of making peace with an Arab country is a fantastic idea. Who can say it's wrong? At the same time, there have to be conditions, basic conditions of peace. The United Arab Emirates is one of the key nations that supports UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Not only do they support it, they're the number 5 supporter in the world and the number 1 supporter in the Arab world. Now, what's the problem with UNRWA?
Wait, they're the number 5 supporter of world countries for UNRWA, and the number 1 supporter of the Arab Muslim world for UNRWA.
Right. Now, what could possibly be wrong with supporting a refugee agency? UNRWA, our agency has studied UNRWA for 32 years. We've been putting out research, we're putting out films, studies, interviews, investigations, every kind of thing possible. It's on our website, israelbehindthenews.com. You can see it. Everything is pristine, facts, not opinions, but facts. And the UNRWA school system, and we've just completed a 20-year study of the UNRWA school system, which is based on material they get, of course, from the PLO. And it is based on one principle: right of return by force of arms. That's a theme that goes through all 364 school books, all of which are sitting on top of our desk.
And these are all school books put out by an agency under the United Nations.
Under the United Nations, yes. This is not Mad Magazine. This is the United Nations, correct? And the United Nations
and their educational program is focused on that message of killing Jews.
Correct. 20 years ago, on August 1st, 2000, the books came out. I had the first meeting with the Palestinian Minister of Education, whose name was Abu Hummus, quite a name, Naim Abu Hummus, and he met with me. And he was pleased that I was the first one to come to see him and get 5 sets of the new school books that came out. And I told him about our interest in UNRWA. He said UNRWA signed a contract that they would be the PA would be the exclusive suppliers of school books. Now, why is this important? Because at the time, the idea that the Palestinian Arabs would be supplying their own school books was revolutionary, because they could always blame other people for the incitement, etc. This was their baby. And the first diplomat who received their books, who was privileged to receive it, was Pietro Sambri, Archbishop Pietro Sambri, the papal nuncio, the representative of the Catholic Church. He looked at the books. He said, he knew Arabic. He said, these are war manuals. And he recommended to the Italian government, one of the funders, that they pull their money out, which they did.
When was this?
August 1st, 2000. Okay? So, in other words, and now he got very little publicity. Dr. Yuri Stern, who was in the Knesset at the time, may he rest in peace, he tried to give it some publicity, but it was still in the euphoria of Oslo, and the school books, the education system was designed as the panacea for creating peace. Shimon Peres, who was then the foreign minister, he said, well, they have a peace curriculum. And he referred me to the peace curriculum at Berzeit University, where there is one. One problem: I went there. I actually went one day, got up in the morning from Efrat and took an Arab bus to Berzeit University. And they said, well, there's good news and bad news. Good news, there are school books for peace. On the other hand, anyone no one is allowed to use them. Oh, little problem. And for 20 years, this has been going on. And every time there's a new set of books, we get them. We got the initial permission to get them because we had met with Yasser Arafat at the recommendation of Rabbi Menachem Fruman, who did all kinds of dialogues with Arabs in Judea, Samaria. And I asked Mr. Arafat, when are you going to be putting out anything for peace in the Arabic language? He said, I want you to see our new school books. So with the hechsher, with the permission of Arafat, we got the books, and we got in to see the Palestinian Minister of Education. And what's very important to understand is that the people who supply, those who supply the funds for the books are not the United Nations, but the UN donor countries. And UN donor countries are told by UNRWA that they're school books for peace, except they won't supply them with the school books. We get the school books. We offer the school books to the donor countries. As a matter of fact, we've had the privilege, thanks to the introduction of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, of meeting with the Office of the Secretary General of the UN 5 times, showing them the books, and they were shocked. And they said to us, you've got to go to the donor countries to do anything about it, because they're the ones responsible. Now, one of the donor countries is the UAE, United Arab Emirates. We didn't know how we were going to have any expose to the UAE, and now they're up there. They're out there. So the fact that a deal has been made with the UAE, which is going to involve a lot of economics, a lot of funds flowing back and forth, gives the UAE new credibility. Now, what's the problem? So far, the government of Israel has made no demands, no requests, not even a discussion on what UAE is doing with its money vis-a-vis the Palestinian Arabs. There's a lot of misinformation going on, as if the UAE has abandoned the Palestinian Arabs, except when it comes to UNRWA, they have quadrupled their funds. Now, this is your newsworthy moment in this program. The UAE quadrupled their funds to UNRWA over the last 2 years, actually a year and a half, from $12 million to $51 million. What's
12 million to 20 to 51 million.
There seems to be an echo here, yes.
Wow.
And now, what's important is not the increase in funds, but the fact that the funds go unchecked, not in any way, shape, or form monitored. And we understand from our sources that the funding goes right into the school system. And what's important about the school system is that it was bad enough, but in the last 3.5 years, our main translator is Dr. Arnon Gross, who used to be number 2 in the Voice of Israel Arabic section. He's pointed out that the school books have gone through a radicalization. In other words, no longer they talk about the war against Israel as a war against Zionism. No more war against Judea Samaria. It's against any place that a Jew lives. It's the war against the Zionism, the Zionists, and he points out that there's 3 principles of the new school books. 1, delegitimation of any place for the Jews in the Middle East. 2, demonizing Jews. Now they're worth. I don't even want to express some of the curses used in terms of how they're described in the school books, but you can see it on our reports. And number 3, the issue of preparing them for war to liberate all of Palestine. Their theme is right of return by force of arms. That is supported by the nation that Israel is now going into a peace process without looking at what they're doing with their money. Now, I don't think that I will be the last one to raise, but we're certainly the first people to raise this issue. There's euphoria, and now anyone who lives in Israel or in the Middle East for more than 10 minutes knows that people can speak out of a couple sides of their mouth. The same person smiling at you can also stab you in the back. That's part of Middle East culture, and this is what's happening right now. The same people who are smiling at the Jews and there's kosher restaurants, there's nice airlines, there's even deodorants. I have a cousin who goes back and forth from London, who goes back and forth to Abu Dhabi with his family. Very nice, for pools, everything you could dream of as a vacation spot. But however, there's a certain request of Israel to forget about your integrity. Well, because I happen to stand up for integrity, and that's what we've been doing. We were the bad boys during the Oslo process. We were the bad boys. We sent out a TV crew to follow Arafat around in terms of what he was saying in Arabic, and to the point where we made a presentation in Washington at the United States House of Representatives. And when Rabin found out about it, he said, quote, "David Bedin is my greatest pain in the ass," end quote. Which is fine. That goes on my resume very well. But the point is that we were the bad guys, because everyone there, people forget about the euphoria of Oslo and how many business deals were being made in the wake of Oslo. And that's what's happening here. 200 Israeli forums are now functioning in Abu Dhabi and suburban Abu Dhabi. There's synagogues, there, as I mentioned, kosher food, everything possible. So we asked the rabbi of Abu Dhabi, what he can say. He sent us to the UAE representative in the United Nations. We've asked for an interview. I don't know if we'll get one. But the issue is everything is public domain. And I just sent you a chart, which I hope you can put on your
Wait, would you like to show it right now? I could show it
sure,
right now.
Let's look at the chart. Yeah.
Let's bring up the chart so people can see what you are referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And you could explain what we're looking at.
Sure.
This
chart comes from the UNRWA website, and we extrapolated from it and show that the increase of funds from UNRWA to from UAE to UNRWA. Now, what's important to understand, this is available to everyone. Everyone has it. Last week we warned people in the Israeli government and the highest level of Israeli security about it, and asked if they would raise it. Well, for some reason, I don't get my calls returned. I also don't get my calls returned about Germany. Germany, which is now the leading funder of UNRWA at the level of $177 million. The background here, by the way, is that we did succeed in getting enough material to the United States government, so the United States government pulled out of UNRWA. That used to be their leading funder. And just divine providence would have it that I happened to meet a close friend of President Trump a month before he was sworn in, and I didn't plan it. Met her at a conference, and she brought the material to President Trump, who had it on his desk in his first meeting with Bibi in February 2017. So he acted there, and now what we're going to ask the Americans to do is to follow their example and cut back on UNRWA, certainly on their education.
So is that what is? So break this down for everybody. So here we see that the UAE has ramped up its funding of UNRWA, which basically, even though it's a United Nations organization, it funds the education and the next generation of Arabs who I say call themselves Palestinians, this whole cause called Palestine, and they're being educated to destroy Israel and kill Jews. That's what basically UNRWA is about, right?
That's what it's all about. And not, by the way, I'm glad you didn't use the word hate, because we don't see hatred. We see these children turning into robots. When you see our films, the films aren't on today, but I'm inviting your program to have us back and show our films. We made 24 films shot on location in UNRWA, and you see the children in a robotic fashion talking about their dedication to killing Jews, right? And rather shocking.
We've promoted your videos before. So basically, what you're saying right now is a problem with this deal with the UAE is that the UAE is the #1 Arab Muslim funder of this organization, that UNRWA, which is dedicated to educating the Palestinian Arabs to destroy Israel and kill Jews.
That's right.
And they are the 5th greatest, the biggest funder in the whole world. So therefore, Israel should have gone into this with their eyes wide open, regardless of them saying, okay, we're not going to let the Palestinian Arabs stop from making peace anymore. But Israel should have said to the UAE, well, it's wonderful you want to make peace with us, but there's no way you could give $51 million to an organization that's educating to a whole generation and already 2-3 generations of Palestinian Arab children to murder Jews and destroy Israel. Is that what you're basically?
Precisely. Let me move this conversation into a positive light. Okay? We have Rosh Hashanah, the new year, around the corner. And that's two and a half weeks from now. Right now, over the next 2.5 weeks, the details of the deal between Israel, the U.S., and the United Arab Emirates are being worked out. People watching this program can give input to the government of Israel and to the government of the United States and say, excuse me, but there's certain conditions. We want to have peace, but what are the conditions? And you can mention the school. Everything's on our site for people to see. It's everything. There's nothing which is hidden here. Look on the school books. There's even, and this is without precedent, okay? 2 years ago, a school book was introduced for children to learn a poem about liberating Palestine and exterminating the Jews. Now that features in a few of our recent films, because the children are very proud to show how they chant this. And on the first day of the school year, August 8th, we had a crew there in Gaza, and the children, what do they want to show us? The children reciting the song about liberating Palestine and exterminating the Jews in those words. Now, this can be stopped. The next 2 weeks, we have an opportunity I like to talk about opportunities in addition to problems, right? A problem is a problem when someone makes it into a problem. That's what my social work professor, Eliezer Jaffe, used to say. Okay? Here, if it doesn't take a lot of people to make it, but if 10 people who watch this program communicate to David Friedman, the secretary, the ambassador,
U.S. ambassador,
right? and to Netanyahu, to the National Security Council here, Israel's National Security Council, they will listen. They don't have a choice but to listen when you speak from integrity. You don't need the reason you don't need an organization behind you, but there's no organization that will take up this issue. I assure you.
So, but let me ask you a challenging question, which I hope you tell me I'm wrong, but I'm almost positive I'm right. If I'm not mistaken, the Israeli government itself, knowing all the information, the horrible aspect of UNRWA, and that it should be shut down, and there's really no need even for their UNRWA to exist, because the United Nations already has a refugee organization, and here UNRWA is being used as a platform to destroy Israel. Knowing all of that information, the government of Israel, even under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has done nothing, or virtually nothing, to stop the world countries funding UNRWA and UNRWA's activities in Yehuda and Shomron. And therefore, if that premise is correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, then our challenge is not the problematic aspect of the deal and having the UAE stop funding UNRWA. Our challenge is even the Israeli government not doing anything to force UAE to stop funding UNRWA, because the Israeli government has done nothing to stop UNRWA using its relations around the world. Am I off with that question?
You're partially correct and partially not. Here's where you're correct. The government of Israel has done nothing to try to restrain or constrain the quality of aid that's given to UNRWA. Done nothing. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, when Israel's foreign minister was in Germany, where Germany is the lead funder of UNRWA, he said nothing against it. And on the other hand, our agency was called in by the top brass of the government of Israel a few years ago to say that the government of Israel has made a decision to do away with UNRWA. Can we help them? So
when was this?
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
And that ever since, the highest levels of the government of Israel have been meeting with us in the foreign ministry, the prime minister's office, and Israeli intelligence. And not only that, but the Meir Amit Center for the Study of Terrorism, which is funded through the Israeli intelligence. Actually, they publish our reports, all of our reports, right, and it gives the hechsher of the Israeli intelligence. So they're operating on two levels. On the one hand, the government of Israel has made a decision, and they told us on the record to phase out UNRWA. On the other hand, they're not doing what needs to be done. Now, that's what Israel's all about. I just celebrated 50 years in Israel on my 70th birthday a few days ago, although I'm going to be 32. It's okay. But understand something. The tension of Israel are the people who speak with one mouth and act with another one. In other words, there's a dichotomy in terms of how that's the, in a sense, challenge to be in Israel, because you hear a policy and you hear the policy not being reinforced. So when in the light of this program, in light of take a strong pill and look at our site, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, it's very painful. But when you see it and you know that the Israeli government is on the record saying they want to phase out UNRWA, what are you doing about it? And how about Germany? $177 million unchecked. And Germany also finances 34 NGOs inside UNRWA. Very often they're promoting, what are they promoting? What they call right of return by force of arms. And we've just discovered a new interlocking network functioning in Berlin with the funding of the German government. Say that again, because you were cut off. Were cut off. What did you find out? I'm sorry. We have recently discovered in our research, and this will be in our next paper that we will submit to the UN and to the Knesset and everyone possible, that the German government is also funding an interlocking network for the right of return with a whole slew of Arab organizations based in Germany. And not right of return, not even to Judea, Samaria, but mapping out areas in Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, etc. And what in that interview I had with Arafat back in '96, I asked him a question: What's our role in your Palestinian state that you're imagining to be? Those of us who live in Judea, Samaria. He said, You can stay where you are. You didn't take Arab land. But if you're from Ramla or Lud, you'd have to leave. So they have a concept of settlements and illegal settlements. Now, I'm in one of the just settlements. Now, understand one thing. You can have an influence. You can say to the government of Israel and the government of the United States, both countries have come out so strong against UNRWA. Now is the time that you're making, and everything is, and things are not clear. It's not sealed. It's like such a theme of Yom Kippur, and that it is not been signed and sealed yet. Yes, there's an idea that there's going to be a peace proposal. There's going to be some kind of a settlement, and it's not in cast in lead yet. And I'm just saying to all of you that this is an opportunity. Yes, it's a problem. Yes, and it's a headache, but make it into an opportunity. And the message to everyone, and again, it doesn't take a lot of people to influence policy. A friend of mine just retired from Congress at my tender age, was working there for 45 years on the Hill. I said, how does Congress operate? He said to me, when we get 10 letters on any subject, we go into a tizzy, 10 from the whole country. That's the way Israel also operates. 10 passionate calls and letters to Netanyahu, to David Friedman, to anyone else in power. That's what works. And we have a couple of Congress people who've been very helpful to us in terms of making the case, and also making the case to one of them is Congressman Doug Lamborn from Colorado. And I can just tell you, when these congressmen open their mouths, they'll listen to. And we have friends. I'm going to surprise you. We have some friends in the office of the UN Secretary General who are shocked by the material we bring them. They said they can't get a hold of the books. So we created a special website so they can see all of the Palestinian Arab books, or the Arabic language books that come out.
If you can send me those links, I'd like to have them so I can publish together with this program, so people can see them. So again, it's very important what you're saying, because you're saying we should be looking at this as an opportunity. This is a problem. It is a problem. I mean, it's a problem from two perspectives. First of all, it's a problem that Israel has not made that demand. Even though that's not surprising, because Israel, historically, we're very bad at making demands of people who give us trouble. We're just happy people want to talk to us, want to come to the table with us. But also a problem that the United States didn't even make this demand, knowing that the United States did take steps against UNRWA. So you'd think, as a country that understands the danger and the evil that UNRWA itself represents, that even the United States doesn't want to be associated with anymore, they don't see $51 million a year being given from UAE to this United Nations organization that is about evil and destroying Israel, therefore should be a deal breaker. Like, you want to make peace with Israel? Well, you can't fund an organization that is raising a whole generation of children to destroy Israel and murder Jews. So it's surprising from both those angles. On the other hand, maybe not many people are familiar with it, and looking at the opportunity to raise this issue with the correct people in the American administration and Israel can ensure that over the next few weeks that is taken care of. But I'm going to throw it. Yeah.
We have an opportunity for 2 weeks, and grab it. And
right, so everyone call your congressman, write letters.
And letters work. Letters also to the Israeli government work. No one knew about this $51 million business. No one knew about the quadrupling of their aid until we happened to open up a computer and notice it. You have to have that magnifying glass and see it. And by the way, there are 200 Israeli corporations who are amongst the biggest donors to all the political parties, who say this is what you have to pay attention to, the profits that come into their pockets. But we're supposed to be a nation of prophets with a PH, not with an F.
So I want to follow up. This is a more strategic-oriented question, so answer it as you see fit. On the one hand, it doesn't make sense for the UAE to continue funding. Basically, by making a deal with Israel, they're basically saying, we're not allowing you, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, to dictate our foreign relations in this world. We know a relationship with Israel is beneficial for us in dealing with Iran and the growing tensions within the region and what's developing in the Middle East. Why would they want to continue funding the UNRWA, which is about destroying Israel? Up until now, you could say, they were playing lip service, trying to show the Arab world that they were supporting the Palestinian cause against Israel. But now they're siding with Israel.
You don't understand that they're playing both sides?
So that's what I'm getting at.
Over the last 2 weeks, the people from the UAE have been sending out speakers all over the Arab world. We have not abandoned the Palestinian Arab cause. In other words, we haven't abandoned the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which is still functioning. And the fact that they quadrupled, I just saw an article by a very silly analyst who doesn't do his homework, is, oh, they've lost all support. Would you please do your homework? When in 10 minutes on the internet, I'm able to find that they quadrupled their funding to UNRWA over the last year and a half. That's not abandoning a cause. That's increasing the cause. And that's playing both sides. And that's what they're doing. And they're doing it brilliantly.
So I'm going to ask you from the other direction, taking that into consideration, which makes perfect sense. It's horrible, but makes perfect sense. Then even if Israel and the United States pushes them against the wall, they're going to say, no, we're not doing that. We're not taking off a penny. Or maybe we'll take off 10 million or 20 million, but we're going to continue because they want to be looking that support the Palestinian cause for holding up their bona fides.
Well, now that there's 200 Israeli corporations doing business in Abu Dhabi, the threat to those corporations is we're not going to do business with you if you continue with your funding of an agency that basically trains children to kill Jews. In other words,
okay, but call me naive, or maybe don't call me naive. Call me whatever you want to call me. But even if you and me sat down personal meetings with the CEOs of all 200 of those corporations,
I'm talking about the
majority of them. What? A majority of them will say, whether they stop funding or not, I'm still going in the direction of making this deal with UAE companies. Am I wrong?
That's the Jews. You're right about the Jews. But if the Arabs feel if the Arabs feel threatened, that their profits may be threatened, they may act differently. I do not trust for one moment that a Jewish person will lose his profits or even stand over a matter of principles. But this is the social worker in me, which says that if you put the interest of the other side on the table, if they think for a moment that their new corporate investments in Israeli corporations may be in trouble, they may act differently. I don't think the Jews will act differently, but I think the Arabs may act differently.
Interesting.
But remember, there's a difference in mentality in business. Most people think that if you do business in the Western world, I'm sure that Jared Kushner's business background would say to him, you do business with someone, he's your friend. That's not the way it works here. And that because you do business with him, fine, you can still be at war with him. And by the way, again, along the principle, don't ask David Badin what's new. When you look at all of the concessions that the UAE made, one of them was not to leave the Arab League and abandon the Arab League's war against Israel. Now, a little detail, okay? The League of Arab Nations, of which the UAE is part of, they're still at war with Israel. Now, I guess it's a quiet war, a war of attrition. But again, one way to weaken us is to do business with us.
So shouldn't? Oh, first of all, that's very interesting. You're saying doing business with us weakens us because it puts our guard down.
Down? How about non-existent?
Non-existent, right? All of a sudden, Israelis think we're at peace with UAE and no more war with the Arab world, or at least with that Arab world. What was I going to say? So basically, what you're trying to say is, even though that they pulled themselves out of boycotting Israel. You're saying, well, that's nice, but that's peanuts because they are still a signature to the Arab League's decision of being at war with Israel. So shouldn't that be a demand as well, that they pull out of that?
Let's do one Turk at a time, as they say in Israel.
Para,
or cow, whatever. Listen, one thing at a time. One thing at a time.
Wait, but why? So what? Why is
the Arab League? Because the Arab
knowing
League,
that these are both knowing that these are both problematic. These are both very problematic issues. One, that they're funding $50 million to the UNRWA, and two, that they did not pull out of the Arab League's decision of being at war with Israel. Why is the UNRWA one more important to focus on instead of the other?
I'll tell you why. One is realistic. One is not realistic. It's realistic to pull out of the UNRWA education, given the precedent of Egypt and Jordan, who maintained their membership in the Arab League while conducting a peace treaty with Israel. They got away with it, and it worked out. But here you have a situation. So you don't have to go that far Israel didn't make that demand of Egypt, did not make that demand of Jordan when they made their deals with Israel. Here you have something much easier, much more focused, and much more clear, because UNRWA has established a new school system at war with Israel, training every child to be at war with Israel, and with no, we went through all 364 books. I would be the most popular journalist in the world if I find one book of the 364 books sitting on the shelf over here, one book which stressed peace. Wow, I would get a Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know people would be. Wow, David Bedin, the man who discovered peace in the PA. I'd have my they put a headline in the New York Times, all kinds of places, but there's not one hint, not one. And by the way, the word is UNRWA, which is United Nations agency, which is which backs us up. They put out these new school books where not only does Israel not exist, but all Jewish cities are renamed as Arab cities. Hello? In other words, total destruction. And this is in the last 3 years. It's gotten worse, not better. Now, this is one of the things that shocked the office of the UN Secretary General. They didn't know that, so we showed it to them. And that's why we created a special website. Anyone on this, while following this program, can write to me. The special website, it's in Arabic. You can see the entire school system. The people who do know Arabic is not hieroglyphics. You can see the entire school system, and we'll give you the password, how to get onto it, and take a look at it. And that's it. Because we are open books, open sources, and it would give me great nachas to be able to broadcast, to telecast that we found a book for peace, but we didn't. Now, this is a much easier thing to go for than saying get out of the Arab League.
Understood.
And much easier, and it's doable. And right now, our friends in the UAE are vulnerable. By the way, I just saw a article in today's Jerusalem Post that all the Jewish organizations in the world are establishing relations with the
UAE.
We can't ask them to make this a condition. Hello? I mean, it's an easy condition.
Well, the Jewish organizations are against shutting down UNRWA as well, because they're all for
they're not against.
Jewish organizations are against UNRWA? Not even knowing
what you know. Organizations follow the law, the actions of the government of Israel, which is against UNRWA, but does not do anything to stop it. So that's not a strong argument.
Right.
They follow the example, but not the policy of the government. The policy of the government of Israel. I have a letter from the government of Israel from November 2016 supporting our work. We asked for that letter on October 1st, 1986, and we got the letter on November 8th, November 10th, 2016. It took a while. Mail takes a while in Israel to get there. But okay, we have it. Now that's a policy which is not being enforced. But let's just take anything logical. You have all these organizations dealing with the implications of the murder of the 6 million Jews. Well, those organizations can take this very, very seriously. And there's no reason why this kind of curriculum should be allowed to exist. And you log on to our website, you'll see the poem that the kids learn every day and chant every day in school about exterminating the Jews. Well, it's there. And it's a reasonable thing to say, excuse me, that's not appropriate. That's the word we use in social work for saying the worst possible thing when you say it's not appropriate. But that's the story. And I want to be encouraging to everyone, left, right, and center, religious, non-religious, doesn't matter, whether you live in Israel or abroad. You can make an issue out of this issue. And I was actually inspired by a Reform rabbi on this issue when I was a senior in high school, who said, this was 6 months after the Six-Day War. The Arab refugees are our problem now. And let's take it seriously. When I came to Israel in 1970, what I kept hearing, the Arab refugees are great for cheap Arab labor. Oh, well, that's what's called short-term thinking. We have to think for the future. And there's a great man named Mordechai Ben Porat, who's now 98 years old, who created a project for resettling the Arab refugees. We met with him recently, a wonderful fellow. We have his program from 1982, which is on our website, israelbehindthenews.com. And the Ben Porat program could be implemented at any moment. And that would solve the problem, give these people a decent place to live instead of having them, wallow in refugee camps. 75% of the Arabs who live in Gaza are in refugee camps. They live there under the premise and promise of the right of return. Anyone who at this point raises his head and said, I'd like to leave, can get that head shot off.
Right. And all these $51 million just this year given from the UAE, none of it is is used in order to build better housing and to get rid of these refugee camps, even though the Palestinian Authority and Hamas have been in charge already for over 25 years.
Oh, excuse me, the PLO and Hamas, the PA or the PLO and Hamas, that's part of their ideology.
Exactly, right.
That's the ideology. I never talk about the Palestinians. I talk about either the PLO, PA, Hamas, whatever. They were brought over and imposed on the Palestinian Arab people in 1993. And there's no reason to see them as a representative body.
So, and again, just to go back to your point and to emphasize to everyone that you can make a difference within these next 2 weeks. Call, write letters to Israeli officials, to American officials,
and to the media,
and to the media. Right. And one reason,
I'm just going to say, take anything we've written, copy paste, put it anywhere. We have all the articles there about how terrible this education system is. And you can say, excuse me, but this is not acceptable. And our material is primary source material. It's not editorialized. And this is what they're saying. And there's no reason why these school books should be allowed to continue. These camps, which are infiltrated by and taken over, we revealed more than 20 years ago about the terror takeover.
I lost you. I lost you. You said these camps were infiltrated?
It was taken over 20 years ago by terror organizations. And we got that study to be funded by the European Union, European Parliament, thanks to a connection that Rabbi Benny alone made for us in the European Union. And that caused Canada to pull out of UNRWA for a couple of years, for actually 4 years. And there's no reason why, given the Canadian example, that couldn't happen again. What we're doing, by the way, we're starting a new organization this Sunday in Stockholm, which is one of the big funders of UNRWA, to try to get Swedish people on our side. And what a member of the Swedish Parliament said to me on the record, he says, I don't really like Israel, but I don't like to see the funds that we're giving to the Palestinian Arab people wasted.
Got it. And again, another reason why this is easy or easier to achieve, to make the pressure to get this as a condition for the deal, is that the United States of America pulled out of UNRWA. So they understand this. That's
right. The U.S. understands it very well. President Trump understands it, and he saw the books just by the happenstance of meeting his a colleague of his, an advanced person of his. We gave her the material, and he knows it. The Trump administration knows this very, very well, and they've invited us to appear in a part of the Heritage Foundation next week on a Zoom conference to discuss this issue. But I can just say, by the way, you can raise it with politicians in America. They're having an election in 2 months. So your politicians say, do politicians favor keeping Arabs in refugee camps under false pretenses? It's a serious issue.
Right.
And the UAE.
All right. Well,
thank you,
David Bedin. Thank you very, very much for this information. It's definitely important, and hopefully, a lot of people, their eyes have been opened to this perspective, this information that is not out there, and you're definitely giving everyone something to do. With the hope that we can make a difference over these next 2 weeks. So thank you very, very much.
You can. My website is behind my head here. Israel Behind the News. Let me just adjust it. IsraelBehindTheNews.com. Everything is there, and it can't be ignored, but people choose to ignore it. But that's okay. That's part of what happens when you see reality. I'm always will believe that the Seder was created because people tried to deny what happened to the Jews in Egypt, and that was the way to solve that. And so that's my role. I'm not a rabbi. I'm simply a argumentative social worker who went to this kind of research, and I've been doing this for 50 years, and a few more people are listening, and my cat and dog listen. And I know that you have to have a sense of humor when you realize that you're the only one raising the issue. But on the other hand, let me be encouraging. In 1993, we were the only ones raising the issue of Arafat's credibility, and there became a tidal wave, a tsunami of people who woke up. Many agencies, many good agencies, started in order to challenge the credibility of Arafat, who remember got the Nobel Peace Prize. Right. And I'll finish with a funny story for you. I was there when Arafat got the Nobel Peace Prize, and I asked him if he's going to be crushing Hamas like Rabin in Paris said he would. He said, "No, they're my brothers." Then when he went into this, it was Shabbat already, so I couldn't record it. Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night, when he got the award, I was sitting next to someone who knew Arabic and listened to his
acceptance speech,
right? And in his acceptance speech, he talked about the armed struggle to liberate Palestine. He threw that in. So I asked the Norwegian government, "Can I have a recording?" They were very nervous, and they never gave it out. So
wow.
all I can, and in my work, if you don't have a sense of humor, and you don't believe that God is above you, you can't succeed. Anyway,
well, David, thank you.
Let's hope that the words of shalom will be real words of shalom that came out of Abu Dhabi this week, and that but it depends on you, the people who listen to these words, speaking up, having your voices counted. And in a democracy, agreement is not essential. Participation is. That's an old Greek adage, which we learned at the World Affairs Council when I was in high school. And I can tell you that if people raise this issue, you'll make a lot of people nervous, but so what?
Great message. David Bedin, thank you very much.
Thank you. Shalom u'bracha.
And all of our viewers, I hope you enjoyed, not necessarily enjoyed, but I hope you took in a lot of this information and will do something about it, and definitely let other people know. Share this information, share this video, go to David Bedin's website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, in order to find out this information and the source materials he's talking about. We can make a difference. And again, this isn't against the deal made with the UAE, but it's against the aspect that even though they made a deal with Israel, they just funded in 2019 $51 million to the UNRWA, which is basically an organization out to destroy Israel and educate the next generations of children to destroy Israel. Thank you for watching. Signing off for another Pulse of Israel here in our ancestral and eternal homeland. Shalom, everyone.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.